After letting my neighbor park in my driveway during renovations, I came home to find my car towed, my driveway jackhammered, and a private property sign with his name on it. I upgraded the block, he said, tossing me the broken mailbox. 3 weeks later, I filed something he didn't see coming. I live in a quiet suburb outside Kansas City. Nothing fancy. Just one of those older neighborhoods where people mow their own lawns and say, "How you doin'?" from the porch. I've been here 12 years. Long enough to know which neighbors are trouble and which ones just want to be left alone. Roger McKinley moved in next door last fall. Retired contractor, from what I heard. Drove a big white pickup and always had some kind of project going. We weren't close, but we were polite. Neighbor stuff. He'd wave when I took the trash out. I'd nod if I saw him in the yard. In April, he came by one afternoon and asked if he could use my driveway for a couple of weeks. Said he was having his garage floor redone and needed space for a dumpster and a crew truck. I wasn't using it much, since I had a 2-week work trip coming up. Figured it was harmless. I said, "Sure, just don't block the mailbox." He smiled and said, "Appreciate it. I'll mow your yard while you're gone." I left on a Wednesday. Took my car to long-term parking at the airport. Didn't think about Roger or my driveway once while I was gone. I got back on a Monday. Late flight. Uber dropped me off just after 11 p.m. That's when I saw it. My driveway was gone. Not blocked. Not dirty. Gone. It had been ripped out. The old concrete was replaced with some kind of textured stone, stamped like a patio. New retaining bricks lined the sides, and at the front, a shiny aluminum sign was mounted into the ground. Private property. Permit 2845. R. McKinley. My name's not R. McKinley. This was still my house. I just stood there, suitcase in hand, trying to process it. My driveway looked like it belonged to a completely different house now. My mailbox, the one I'd had since I moved in, was lying on its side near the front steps, cracked in half. And my car wasn't there. At first I thought maybe the crew had just finished and hadn't cleared everything. But then the porch light flicked on next door. Roger stepped out in slippers, holding a mug. He saw me and grinned. "You're back," he said. "Didn't think you'd be in until Thursday." I asked him what the hell happened to my driveway. "Oh, yeah," he said, walking toward the edge. "Had the guys finish it up quick. Decided to do a full upgrade. Clean lines, better drainage, whole deal. Looks better for both our properties, don't you think?" Then he tossed the broken mailbox at my feet. "That fell during demo. Meant to tell you." I asked again where my car was. He took a sip of whatever was in his mug and said, "Had to get it towed. Wasn't permitted on the new surface." That's when I realized he wasn't joking. I told him this was my property, my driveway, that he had no right to touch it without permission. He just laughed and said, "You might want to double-check your plat map. Lines have shifted a bit over the years. I've got some documents if you want to see." I called the cops that night. They came, took a statement. Said it sounded like a civil matter. Told me to talk to a lawyer. They wouldn't even step onto the driveway. Said unless there was evidence of criminal damage, it was property line confusion. The next morning I went to the tow yard. Roger had reported my car as abandoned on private property. I had to pay $647 to get it out. The driveway, according to the city, was under review. For 3 weeks, I tried to stay calm. I filed complaints. I went to the city council. I talked to a lawyer who wanted $6,000 just to get started. Roger, meanwhile, had added hedges along the side of the new driveway. He even ran string lights across the top. Told people I'd sold him part of my lot and was moving soon. The thing is, I never signed anything. Never agreed to anything. He just took it. So I stopped being polite. I didn't go to court. I went to the title office. I pulled my property records, plat maps, easements, every line, every inch. I spent hours going through the files. That's when I noticed something Roger must have missed. My driveway wasn't entirely on my lot. About 3 feet of it, near the edge, did technically cross the line into his parcel. It had been like that since 1971. grandfathered and under something called prescriptive easement. But here's the thing, his renovations erased that. By tearing out the original driveway and replacing it with new construction, he voided the easement protections. In legal terms, that 3 feet, that was his. But the rest of it? Still mine. And now, legally vulnerable to counterclaim. I filed a property encroachment and forced reversion. Then I did something pettier. I flagged the work he did as unpermitted construction.
No electrical inspection.
No concrete curing test. No permit on file. I even called the HOA, which he'd opted into voluntarily when he moved, and filed a non-compliance complaint about the sign, the lighting, the hedge, and the drainage reroute. By the end of the month, the city was on him. He got slapped with over $12,000 in code violations. HOA gave him a formal warning. And that wasn't the worst part. The kicker? I applied for a lot adjustment and reclaimed every inch of the old driveway footprint, which meant everything he built, the hedge, the lights, the sign, had to be ripped out. But I didn't stop there. Roger didn't take it well. The day the code enforcement officer showed up, he stormed over to my porch. No smile this time.
No coffee mat.
You think you're clever? He said, jabbing a finger toward my face. You want to play dirty?
Fine.
You want war? You got one. I told him calmly. You should have just asked. Or apologize. He spat on my steps. 2 days later, I came outside to find tire tracks all over my front lawn. Not small ones. Big, deep ruts from a truck, probably his. My new mailbox had been smashed again, this time with what looked like a bat. And a dead squirrel had been duct-taped to the side of my trash bin with a note that said, "Rats live here." I filed a police report. Again. Still no evidence. Still civil matter. But I kept the photos. Every time he stepped out of line, I logged it. Dates, times, witnesses. I even installed a camera under my porch light. He must not have noticed it because 2 weeks later, I caught him on video digging a shallow trench between our yards, trying to shift a boundary marker. I sent the footage to my lawyer, and this time, finally, it crossed the line. Trespassing. Property tampering. He got a citation. Nothing huge, just a fine.
But it was on record now.
And that's when he made his biggest mistake. Roger tried to sell his house. Maybe he thought he could get out before things got worse. Maybe he figured someone else wouldn't care about the mess he'd made. But guess what? When you try to sell a property with an active title dispute, unresolved code violations, and documented harassment claims from your neighbor, no bank will touch your buyer's loan. Every time someone showed up to look at the place, I made sure they knew what they were walking into. I didn't lie. I just stood out front and waved. Said things like, "Did he tell you about the lawsuit?" Or, "You might want to ask about the property line." The sale fell through.
Twice.
Roger was trapped.
Couldn't sell.
Couldn't fix the violations without paying out of pocket. Couldn't make changes without city approval. And then the IRS letter showed up. I don't know the full details, but I do know this. When I requested copies of his building expenses from the city files, part of that request became public record. Someone, somewhere, must have flagged the discrepancy between the work he claimed to do and the taxes he claimed to pay. He started leaving his house less. The project stopped. The truck disappeared from the driveway. And for the first time since this all started, Roger was quiet. But I wasn't done yet. A month later, I got a call from a woman named Jenna. She said she was Roger's daughter. She was polite but firm. "Look," she said, "I don't know everything that happened between you two.
But my dad's not well."
He hasn't been for a while. He didn't tell me any of this was going on until the citations came through. I stayed quiet. Let her talk. "He's been having episodes," she said. "Paranoia. Anger. Sometimes he thinks people are stealing from him. Sometimes he just forgets stuff. Big stuff." I asked, "So what now?" She said, "We're trying to get him to move in with us. Sell the house. Settle whatever needs settling. Would you be open to some kind of agreement? I know he caused a lot of damage." It threw me off. I expected more hostility. But she sounded tired. Honest. Still, I told her I wasn't ready to talk numbers. Not until the property was restored and the violations cleared. She said she understood. But 2 days later, I saw something that changed everything. I was taking the trash out when I spotted someone in Roger's backyard. He wasn't alone. There were 2 men in suits walking the property with clipboards, survey equipment, measuring tape. Not city officials, I know what those look like. These were private. And it clicked. They were developers. Roger wasn't just trying to sell his house. He was trying to sell the lot as part of a combined parcel that included part of my land. Somehow, somewhere, he'd filed a request to redraw the property lines, again, and submitted a plan to rezone both lots as a multi-unit development. I marched right back to my kitchen, printed out every page of my title history, my easement filing, my violation reports, and the footage of him trespassing, and drove straight to the zoning board. The clerk looked over the papers and frowned. "Did you know he listed this as a joint parcel application?" I said no. I'd never signed anything. Never gave permission. Then he just committed fraud. And that changed everything. Within the week, the application was voided. His file was flagged for investigation. And when the developers found out, they pulled their offer. Turns out, they were planning to flip the 2 lots into 3 townhouses. Now, they wouldn't touch the deal with a 10-foot pole. I didn't hear from Jenna again. But that weekend, a for sale, as is, cash-only sign went up in Roger's yard. The grass was overgrown. The lights stayed off. The hedge he planted was dead brown, curling in the summer heat. It looked like a forgotten house. But I still wasn't done. A few weeks passed. Then I got a knock on my door. It was a woman in her 60s, neatly dressed, holding a small file folder and a nervous smile.
"Hi," she said.
"You don't know me. My name's Karen Brooks. I used to live here, in your house, from 87 to 94. I stepped outside. She seemed sincere, so I offered her a chair on the porch. She sat down slowly and opened the folder. "I got your name from the county website," she said. "I saw the complaint you filed about Roger. I wanted to tell you something strange." She handed me an old survey map, hand-drawn, dated 1988. My house, Roger's house. Back then, it was owned by someone else. "This map," she said, "shows a small easement, a drainage strip that runs between the houses. It wasn't part of either parcel, technically. It was city-owned." I stared at it. The shaded area ran right through the side of what's now Roger's backyard, the part he always claimed was his buffer zone. That strip, she continued, was filled in sometime in the 90s. Nobody kept records. But I remember because it used to flood. We called it the ditch. After the city filled it, they never adjusted the maps. She looked at me carefully. "I think Roger knew. I think he built on land that wasn't even his." That night, I pulled the most recent parcel map from the city GIS system. That strip? It wasn't labeled under either of our addresses. Still technically public utility easement, which meant any structure built on it was illegal. Roger's backyard shed? Illegal. His retaining wall? Illegal. His chain link fence? All of it. The next morning, I made 2 calls. One to the zoning board, the other to the local news tip line. And that's when the real show began. They finally tore down his shed last month. I watched from my window as they hauled away the last piece of his fake fence, and for a second, I felt relief. But then I saw the empty yard, the dead grass where the shadow used to be, and I realized something I hadn't let myself admit until then. It was never really about the driveway. It was about someone looking me in the eye and deciding I didn't matter. And I don't think I'll ever forget what it felt like when nobody believed me at first. Not the cops, not the city, not even my own neighbors. I got everything back, sure. But I don't park in that spot anymore. Not because I can't. Just because every time I do, I remember how easily it was taken.